If I may interrupt a little bit, if you have a question, let's go to the question and then she'll try to answer that.
Well, not a question. I'd like you to continue with this area because very little has been published in this area, and I think series like.
So you're trying to motivate us to understand 1971?
No, not necessarily. Another important issue which you would have undertaken is also understanding South Asia, because now the younger scholars are talking about not South Asia, and we can see that you and Dr. Dina Siddiqui and others, they are looking into
Let me do this, let me stop you there and let me say that you will have this conversation with her at the post thing. So hold your thought and we will come back to you. All right? There are some other questions here. Please.
My name is Asif Saleh, I work for BRAC. I want to take the focus a little bit over to UK and migrant Bangladeshis in UK. It's an interesting trend that we saw, that the generation which went during the 70s, fiercely Bangladeshi nationalists, but their kids, the next generation who have been born, have been more comfortable with their religious identity, so more comfortable with their Islamic identity, and which is also creating other issues both in Bangladesh and England. How do you explain that? What is the reason behind that, based on your experience and also the fact that you live in England? Thank you.
All right, let's have those answered, and then we'll have a few people here who've been really waving frantically. Can we wait for the next wave? Let her answer this. You have the microphone, you're in control, so you're next.
Thanks very much. I'll answer the question first about remittances from the person at the back. Yes, of course, we did ask the question about remittances that were sent. And in general, we found that the pattern replicate the pattern that I'm suggesting, that to begin with, perhaps families sent, then gradually over time, you know, people got involved in lives in the places where they were. They had their own problems. For instance, if we're talking about the Biharis who went to Karachi, by God, they had some problems there too. You know, so people become, you know, actually connections between relatives do wither. It's not that these things are not biological. These are not, you know, these things have to be sustained and maintained. And sometimes among the very poor, these things are difficult to do. Also in circumstances where there's such political hostility and tension, it can be quite difficult to send remittances between Bangladesh and Pakistan, or India and Pakistan and such like. It puts people at risk. So a lot of people stopped communicating with families for those sorts of reasons. But we did ask those questions. We probed. We expected to find the positive answer. We got the negative one. Thank you, sir, for your encouragement. I will certainly continue. I've had many emails over the years from people around the world, many Bangladeshis around the world, saying, Joya, now you've written Bengal Divided, Spoils of Partition, now it's the time for the book about 1971. So when are you going to do it? It's a very, very difficult book to write. Maybe I'm inching my way there. Maybe I'll take that up. Okay, thank you for your encouragement. And then the question about the migrants in UK, Bangladeshis in the United Kingdom. This project actually included a UK diasporic element as well. We did about 80 interviews in the UK as well. So Thanks for that question. It enables me to bring it in. The question, I mean, I think that's slightly schematic in saying that the first generation were very nationalistic and the second generation are very Islamic. Although there is perhaps, it's more really the third generation, that the young people who are now in their teens and 20s, who we are really seeing perhaps embracing a different kind of politics, which is potentially post-national and is involved in what we can think of as a kind of diasporic Islam, where they consider the differences between themselves and, say, Ethiopian Muslims and others less important than the national differences. You know, so there is that tendency, and there's a large literature in migration studies about the quest of the third generation, where, you know, the first generation is still rooted in the politics of the homeland. The second generation embraces, if you like, the politics of the new host country, and then the third generation begins to seek a distinctive political voice. It obviously has something also to do with the global moment in which they are living, because it's not only happening among UK Bangladeshis, it's happening amongst communities all over the world, that they are embracing a different kind of global religious politics.
I just got Joya's permission to go beyond 7:30, so if there are issues that go a little bit more, about another 15 minutes or so, then we're open to that. So, gentleman with the microphone.
Thank you, Professor Chatterji. My name is Saeed. I have been teaching anthropology in Department of Anthropology, Jahanganagar University. I just, this year, not really, last month, I just received my PhD certificate from Lancaster on partition of East Bengal. So, and aftermath, like it's basically, I'm from anthropology and working in the field of history, so it's a combination between. So, my interest on your project was particularly the concept of immobility, the way you have used it. I was just thinking, like I can see that often when we consider in binary terms, we often may think that mobility is the opposite side of immobility, but at the same time, if someone's family, like most of the members of the family has departed, had managed to cross the border, and this person here with a few others had to stuck here, his immobility and vulnerability caused by that immobility can only be perceived if you can feel the mobility of the others, like with whom he or she was related. So I just ask to consider everybody in this house, and I just ask whether to you as well, that whether you consider mobility and immobility just as in an opposite connotation, or you just think it's the both sides of the same coin, or it's the same process, and they are linked to each other, and only then we can understand that mobility or immobility is not an economic term. It's much more than that. It has social and human aspect. That's what I understand.
Thank you.
very
There's
much.
a gentleman back there who's also had his hands up for a while.
My name is Tanvir Siddharth. I'm a student of BRAC University. Within the sphere of being stuck, I was thinking about that you have talked about the spatial mobilization or spatial immobility, or being stuck within the sphere of spatial immobility, whether that is vertical or horizontal, or within the classist or interclassical. But I was thinking just to extend the boundary of the mobilization, because could it be temporal also? Because if there is a temporal mobilization, there can be the space for the mobilization of capital. First, the most important thing for the essence of the mobilization, what are you talking about? Because the mobilization of capital itself mobilizes the stuck sphere of being mobilized. Because if you, for example, the mobilization of global policy is not being stuck because mobilization of global policy is always here. Although the mobilization of human power or mobilization of people is stuck. So why can't there be a class analysis of mobilization? Can't there be a global, like the global supply chain of a garment industry, who is very equally mobilizable propensity of this global economic sphere? So why can't there be a capital mobilization through the spatial mobilization of global supply chain of labor? Thank you.
Is there any one more, please? And then I think we'll think of wrapping up. One last question here. All right, you have the microphone. You go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the chance and the opportunity to talk beyond today's issue. I was actually wondering for a long time. At the time of partition, we are talking about mobility and poverty, but we have seen the mobility and huge mobilization of resources. So why it happened during partition? And as you are studying history, focusing on immobility and poverty, do you have have you seen any insights, what actually accelerated the factors of huge mobility with resources? And through all your researches, do you find that in any future there is a chance that the entire Bengal will come together?
I fully agree. My name is Binayak Sen. I'm an economist here. I fully agree with your diagnosis that as economists we know that mobility leads to poverty reduction, particularly if the mobility is accompanied by portable assets, we say human capital assets and so on. But even without bringing in the human capital issue, we know in West Bengal 25% is the Muslim proportion of population, but in urbanization is only 19%. And the reverse is the case in Bangladesh. It's a much higher proportion of Hindu population in urban areas. So you have a contrasting sort of pattern between West Bengal and Bangladesh in terms of rural-urban migration through the racial sort of identity. My question is that I was trying to think that I came a little late, so I missed out some of your remarks. And I'm a fan of your writing. So, whether you are trying to contrast the experience of economic migration with the experience of traumatic migration. Like one is economic migration going for the higher wages and so on. Len Pritchett has a book, Let Them Come, and estimated the rate of returns, etc. Another is that the migration that happens because of some traumatic shocks. So whether you are trying to really compare the ingredients, different patterns, structures, experience, feelings, politics, because that part you did not touch. Even in the colonial part, you mentioned about the racialized identity in different segments of the labor market. And I was interested to know your opinion about whether it has some implication
Thank
for
you.
politics.
In the interest of 2 more questions and then we'll be done. I think the issue was about, are there different kinds of migration? And I think that's very important.
I'm Dr. Shai Gopur. I'm from a very different discipline from you. I teach housing and urbanism. I'm interested in the relevance of historiography for the spatial presence. In your presentation, you have talked about asymmetric infrastructure network that caused ethnic diversity of labor in concentrated spatial areas. Then you moved on to post-colonial stages, where you have noted that the expansion of infrastructure led to homogenization of labor. If we see the Dhaka, things like that, all those ethnic diversities have gone. So my question to you, do you notice the existence of an off-the-grid population today? Thank you.
I'm Safi, I'm a student. So you mentioned once in your speech and then again in comments later that under conditions of abject poverty and immobility, that familial relations tend to wither. So I wondered if you noticed any particular sort of scheme in your research of how these immobile and very poor communities reorganize, if there's any sort of recurring unit or relationship around which these communities reorganize.
I will stop taking questions here. I know I will be disappointing a few people, but we also understand in this process that time is a scarce resource and we have to manage it. So let's wrap it up.
Thanks a lot for some extremely challenging questions. I'll take the first question about the. I was not suggesting this is from the person from Jahangirnagar, Lancaster. Yeah. I'm not suggesting that mobility and immobility are binaries. I'm suggesting that immobility and mobility have a complex mutual relationship. That the mobility of some constitutes the mobility of others. And so it's intertwined in a very complex way. But then there's a process at some point with the passage of time, which is where the temporal comes in, where there seems to be a separation, where they float off from each other. And the immobile are simply stuck and abandoned and all isolated in a most bizarre fashion. Yeah? So that's what I'm trying to suggest. It's not a binary in that sense. The second question about the temporal, hopefully I've woven into that. And I'm not sure I wholly understood the question, but obviously the issue of capital is central to this, and the ways in which capital has penetrated, and the rate at which capital has penetrated, and the processes by which capital has penetrated, I suggest, is central to this story. So this is not a story which is taking capital out of the picture at all. It's trying to make it at the center of the picture, but it's trying to relate a story which we sometimes think of as the story of the history of capitalism or the story of the history of labor, with what we think of as the political history of citizenship or the political history of minority formation. It's trying to show those two things as interlinked processes. I don't know, I probably didn't wholly succeed in that, but that's what I'm trying to do. The reunification of Bengal. I was wondering when it would come up. I think I won't go, maybe we can talk over tea, but I think I should probably say that it's really, in the present circumstance, given what I know about the politics of India, I think it's unlikely. But yeah, and I also think that, but and it's also not the job of historians to predict. Sorry, that's probably my phone. That's my alarm. So that's saying something. Please let's just ignore it. Can I come to the Vinayak Sen, who says he's my fan? Thank you so much. And thank you very much for asking me a really, really good question. Because actually the argument I'm making is that economic migration and forced migration are not separate. They are not, they are analyzed as conceptually separate issues, but in fact the issues are they are bound up. So the people who become refugees and are seen as forced migrants are people who have access to economic mobility. Sorry, it's my alarm. Yeah, so what I was saying was that the point is that I've been trying to make is that the subject divides migrants into two heaps. Economic migrants on one side and forced migrants on the other side. Economic migrants are rational actors and agents responding to the market forces, and forced migrants are essentially not agents, they're pushed out. They're pushed in certain ways. I'm suggesting it's not like that. That people who we see as forced migrants and refugees are basically people who had access to economic modes of migration earlier and are very much tied into those forms of mobility, and then use them when political circumstances make it good for them to migrate. Yeah, so the two forms overlap and intertwine. Finally, this historiography of the grid. I'm losing the thread of what the question was because I didn't write it down properly. It really, I mean, what I feel is one of the big weaknesses of this study is that we did not actually do enough work on the off-the-grid areas. For instance, the village that we talked about where the Ghazi brothers lived, that is an off-the-grid area. There are many such areas like it, but one of the reasons why we didn't do research there is because it's so hard to do research there, because those areas, many areas are still off the grid. It can take 25 hours by bus, and then by motorcycle and then by foot to reach a research site. So these areas do exist, they're all around us, but we choose not somehow to see them because our modes of travel make them very distant to our perception. And finally, there was an excellent question from here about the reorganization of communities. Absolutely, there has been a very interesting reorganization of community structure and family structure among the stayers-on. What you do see, for instance, are very large numbers of households which are headed by women. What you do see are large numbers of households where, people share labor and share care and childcare. And they're mainly they're not all women households, but they are substantially households made up of women, which then form a distinctive community structure in which they participate in labor and the labor of domestic work in distinctive ways, in which they redistribute that work in ways which are not like your normal, if you like, patriarchal family. But it's not something that has been sufficiently analyzed in this particular paper. But I tried to suggest it by showing all those all-women households, or very substantially women households. Yeah, that's the last one.
All right, I think all good things have to come to an end, so this is another one. So Professor Chatterji and the very distinguished members of the audience, this was a glorious evening. I think this was also a joyful gift from Joya, just before Eid. So thank you very much, Joya, I think, for making this trip and sharing a part of your world, a part of your work with us. And I also would like to thank the audience for making this trip at this time. I thought all of you would be going off to your districts, but I think Joya was more exciting, and we're really appreciative that you could make this time. And it's you who made this happen, because without participation we would not have this wonderful get-together. One oblique reference, just one, because there's just so much here. The whole idea of reunification, there was this thing. I sort of would like to suggest that it will not be overt. If at all, it will be subtle. And I think the subtlety will be based on the opening up the Asian highways and all these things, and there will be trade and commerce and all that. And I think there will be something to be seen there, and this is only a hypothesis. And in fact, I also wanted to sort of make this case that this whole entire presentation was so rich. I can see that this is more a generation of a huge set of hypotheses that others can actually take up and run with these things. You know, one study does not answer all the questions, and this is what we're seeing here, right here, that so many other opportunities have arisen for those of you who might want to sort of take up. And I think this will be a wonderful opportunity for BRAC University and BRAC University's good wishes to engage with University of Cambridge, and that's one of the main purposes why Joya is here. So it looks like there's going to be a huge potential opportunity here. I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to even try and parse her work, but let me just mention one other thing, that yesterday I spent some time at the workshop with her. We like to have workshops because we want to share ideas. And this particular workshop was on research methodology and how do you publish. I would like to sort of make one point here. And the point that she made yesterday was, she said to be a good teacher, one must also be a good researcher. That stuck with me. And I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to sort of share with all our academics. And I can tell you, research is hard work. I've done this for 30 years and I know what it is also. But at the end of this hard work, as all you can see, that it can also be very deeply satisfying. And here's an example. So I hope many of you from the academic world will reflect on her words. The third thing, the second thing I'd like to do is to mention that the BRAC University Distinguished Scholar Series is basically designed to bring innovative, influential, and inspiring movers and shakers to the campus of BRAC University. Our objective is to heighten awareness of the academic and the wider community to new horizons of knowledge, and to enrich their perspectives on contemporary issues. The speakers are chosen from not just academics. We'd like to see in future speakers coming from writers, advocates, politicians, business and media experts, statesmen, designers, and even artists from the genre of dance and all that. So essentially we do this, we bring this to our university and the community in which we share space to make for a vibrant, exciting academic environment.